It is noon, so welcome everybody. So this will be our fourth webinar in our Cannon River Watershed Joint Powers Organization Land to Lakes webinar series. Just want to kind of welcome everybody to for joining us here and kind of let you know how we're gonna run everything. So as far as questions go, just use the Q&A box down there at the bottom. If you got any questions, feel free to type them in there and then we'll address those at the end. We're going to go through a short little introduction on what the Cannon River Watershed organization is all about, and then we'll get into the main topic. I am Ryan Lerman. I am with University of Minnesota Extension. I work here in Rice and Steele counties. Just to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded. So keep that in mind, and also know that these will be shared out to you after we get the recording wrapped up. And so I am joined by three folks from Sueur County. So we have Holly Bushman, we have Trigg, Capistrant-Kinney, and we also have John Hammel. And they're going to be talking about septic systems. So I'll let you guys kind of take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. So I'm just going to do the intro of the presentation. I'm Holly Bushman. I work with the Sueur County. I'm the Water Resources Manager. I'm just going to talk about the Cannon River Watershed Joint Powers Organization, and then I will hand it over to John and Trigg in just a moment. So the Cannon, one second. Okay, the Cannon River Watershed. So for those of you that don't know, it's a fairly significant large watershed. It's just shy of 1 million acres. It's predominantly ag as far as land use. About 51% of the watershed's ag, and then about 10% of the watershed is located in the metro. There's a lot of different rivers and streams, and then the partnership that makes up the Cannon River Joint Powers Organization includes Dakota, Goodhue, LeSueur, Rice, Steele, and Waseca. And those are both the counties and the SWCDs. And then we have additionally a few watershed districts and management organizations as well. So it's a pretty large watershed and a pretty large organization. And some projects that we've done in the Cannon River Joint Powers Organization include non-structural practices like cover crops, reduced tillage, soil health, nutrient management, perennial cover, perennial crops, and native shoreline plantings. And then some structural practices that we've done include water and sediment control basins, grass waterways, terraces, grade stabilizations, and well sealings. And so we just receive funding every 2 years to do projects and practices that we've included in our comprehensive plan. And part of that is education and outreach, and that's why we are here today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to John and Trigg. Just bear with us. We are sharing a computer today, so I just want to make sure that we can see ourselves. So I'm going to, all right, Trigg. And then you should be able to just click whenever you're ready. Or I can click for you.
All right, on to the presentation, everyone. So, is your septic system failing? How proper care protects home and water? So, brief introduction to us both. My name is Trigg Capistrant-Kinney, and I'm joined by my colleague, John Hammel. We are both septic inspectors with Sueur County. I've been with the county for 1 year, and prior to that, I have had experience in the private sector, working for a private contractor, helping to do other inspections and signs and other septic work.
Yeah, I'm John Hummel. Got it. All right. I'm John Hummel. I've been in local government since 2007 doing planning and zoning, and just about 3 years ago we switched over, and now I'm doing septic systems.
So, is your septic system failing? How can we answer this question without understanding what exactly a septic system is? So, septic system offers a means of treating wastewater when the connection to a larger municipal system may not be feasible or possible for properties located outside city limits, in more rural areas, whatnot. It provides a means of treatment for their wastewater in a way that protects both human health and also the health of the environment. So now a septic system typically contains at least two components. The first being a septic tank. This is a watertight tank, which is really the first place that treatment starts. It separates your wastewater separates the solids from the liquids and allows for bacteria to begin the process of treatment to further break down solids into smaller particles and separate out wastewater. And from there, septic effluent goes, well, here's a little example of what a septic tank installation looks like. In Minnesota, septic tanks are typically constructed out of either concrete or a polyethylene material. From a septic system, that wastewater effluent is dispersed either by gravity or by pumping to a soil treatment area. This is an area where effluent can be released into the ground to be treated by natural microbes within the soil. But the crucial thing here is that bacteria require oxygen to digest and treat the effluent, treat all the harmful pathogens. And scientists with the University of Minnesota, in coordination with the Pollution Control Agency, have determined that aerobic oxygen-needing bacteria need at least 3 feet of dry soil to treat effluent fully. And we determined that limiting condition by taking samples and identifying redoxomorphic features in soils. Areas in soils which contain red iron concentrations and gray depletions, which indicate the ordinary high water table, area where water has sat for long periods of time. These features have been in the soils created over thousands of years. And the depth where these features are found will determine what kind of septic system you can have on your site. So typically in Minnesota, we see either an in-ground or an above-ground septic system. Two most common ones that you may be already familiar with are the trench system. In-ground, it's pumped. The septic effluent goes to a distribution box where it goes to trench lines, commonly referred to as a drain field or a leach field, where the effluent is dispersed in the ground, or a mound where the effluent is pumped upgrade to that treatment area that we create above ground using rock and washed sand to create that additional required separation. Most systems contain, like some lines, either above ground or in ground, that are over rock, which allow the effluent to be dispersed through perforated pipes over to rock. So now that we recognize what a septic system actually is, then what is an actual failing system? Simply put it, a failing septic system is one that pollutes. We have very specific state criteria in place which define exactly how a system fails. There are two main definitions. Systems are either deemed a failure to protect groundwater or deemed as an imminent threat to public health and safety. There are different criteria for each. Failure to protect groundwater and imminent threat. One imminent threat being considered more severe and more like time needing than the other. So a failure to protect groundwater may imply that your system consists of a cesspool or a pit, or simply put, the biggest thing that we see is that the system does not have the required 3-foot separation between the treatment and the normally wet soil, which means that there's not going to be necessarily the immediate threat to human and public health, but it does mean that untreated effluent is more able to, has a higher potential to reach the groundwater. Imminent threat to public health and safety, as I said, has a much higher connotation, much more time sensitive, can have potential to cause great risks to human health. Those could be imply that your system goes directly to the ground, to a ground surface or to a water body. And there's also much other ways that it can be determined as such. And the big thing to note, I've got this a lot. Many people, they have their septic system has been deemed as failing. It's non-compliant. It pollutes. Just because it works doesn't mean that it may not be polluting. I have a few slides here to give you some examples. This is what we would call a cesspool or a leach tank. This is a non-watertight tank. You see there's holes on the sides here, which allow the effluent to seep into the groundwater, into the, the soil. This is considered a non-compliant system because it does not meet this, have the required separation between wet and dry soil, and septic tanks nowadays need to be watertight. They need to be able to contain that wastewater without any ability for it to leach into the water table. This would be considered a failure to protect groundwater. So again, there's not that immediate risk to human health, but it still does pollute. This is what we call a straight pipe. This is a pipe that goes for your wastewater that goes directly out to a ground surface. This is considered a imminent threat to public health and safety. These types of systems, when we find them, they are the highest priority. We see here, this is all black. This is all untreated wastewater going directly to the ground surface. Here we see effluent surfacing to ground surfaces. This could be considered an imminent threat to public health and safety. I've seen this many times. Like if you have, this is going to cause great problems. If you have, say, like animals running around, dogs running around, they run around your yard, they step in this, they might be playing with it, they come inside, that's bringing very, very harmful bacteria into your house that you do not want. Here's a fun example that we saw. This is an RV right here up in the corner, and this is their sewer line that's going, instead of to either like a sewer line or to a septic tank, it's just going right out into the hill. So high potential for pollution going right by that lakeside right there. That is just something that we really do not want to see. This is improper electrical wiring, could be cause for your septic system to fail. Wiring should really be done by a licensed electrician. So how do we determine that a septic system is failing? The most tried and true method is through a compliance inspection. The compliance inspection entails a licensed individual comes out and they do their due diligence, they fill out the proper paperwork, and they make a proper determination based off what they see on site and based off of their experience that they have. That is the most tried and true way that we know that one is failing. But of course, as I touched on, there are some other ways that could serve as an indication that your system is failing, whether your system backs up often into the home or dwelling. That could mean that a multitude of things, that maybe your drain field is overloaded. It's worked for all these years and now it just can't take any more. Wastewater surfacing, yeah, maybe the drain field can't take any more water. There's other things to consider too. The age of the system, that gets more into that question of like, oh, it works, how can it fail? Maybe it wasn't constructed to the standards of that we can hold systems to today, where it doesn't. We get there's common saying in the industry, like prior to when the rules were widely implemented in the late 1990s, systems were often designed in the morning, installed in the afternoon. They were put in very cheaply, very quickly, but in ways that were not up to today's standards. The frequency of maintenance, how often have you had it maintained? Have you ever had it pumped? When's the last time? How often have you had it pumped? Has it ever been pumped? If it's never been pumped, then there's a higher likelihood that there could be more impacts. The tank could be chock full of solids. It could be deteriorating. The soils on site, if you have thicker, heavier soils versus sandier soils, the sandier soils allow for higher levels of infiltration and may be better equipped to support an in-ground system versus if you have a very thick clay soils on site, maybe that in-ground system wasn't the best choice. If you have someone go out to conduct maintenance on your system and the tank's empty, even though you've been using it consistently, that might be an indication that you have a failing tank. It's not watertight. Liquids, effluent, whatnot is able to seep into the groundwater. Now, all of these can have high impacts on our water resources. That's the reason why we're here. We all have a very deep connection to our water resources. So partially treated or untreated effluent can have high impacts on waterways. They can introduce extra nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen, which can lead to algal blooms, which can lead to excess oxygen depletion. It degrades the quality of our water resources. But not just that, they can also degrade the impact humans. They can introduce harmful pathogens like E. coli, which is a fecal bacteria. These are all things that we really do not want in our waterways and our most precious water resources. So in Sueur County, we have implemented a number of things into our ordinance to get more people to inspect their systems. We have a number of triggers, which are somewhat common throughout the state, but I'd check with your local ordinance to see what those exact triggers are. In Sueur County, we have a trigger for any time that someone applies for a permit from us. This triggers the need for a compliance inspection. If a compliance inspection hasn't been completed within the past 3 years, it's time to get another one. And if the septic system is found non-compliant, then the landowner must update their septic system. Same goes with property transfers and purchases. Our county ordinance requires that a compliance inspection be submitted by the time of closing. If that does not happen, then staff are notified when CRV is filed, a certificate of real estate value, which is put on properties for all sales and transfers for over $3,000. And then if we get that compliance inspection, those new landowners now are responsible for that, and the new landowner is also responsible if their system is not found to be non-compliant. With that, I'll hand it over to my colleague, John. Here's our transition.
Okay.
All right, let's talk operations and maintenance. So the best way to ensure your septic system does not fail is through proper maintenance and preventative efforts. We're gonna go through some do and don'ts here. Do know your system. Know where your system is located. If you're going to be buying a house, this is important. Talk to the realtor, talk to the homeowner, find out where the components are. If you own a property and you don't know where your septic system is, you can try to get a copy of the site plan, which is usually part of the design paperwork. Know your system components. Like Trigg said, they're above ground and below ground and at grades. Know what type of system you have. Know where your tanks are, your drain fields at, your pipes, and your alarm if you have one. Know who you will call if you need maintenance or have problems with your system. Generally recommend you identify a maintainer ahead of time if you don't have one. Try not to wait for problems to occur and be proactive. So if you need to find a septic professional, the MPCA does have a website. The web page is listed at the top here. Otherwise, if you just search for MPCA SSTS search, it'll be the first result to pop up if you Google it. And this is nice. This website lets you search by businesses or by individuals. You can put in a city or you can put in a county. And then down here, specialty area, you can do installer, maintainer, designer, a whole bunch of different options there. Another do is know your management plan. Management plans are required for new septic systems. They provide a breakdown of homeowner management tasks and professional management tasks. And they also provide guidance on water using appliances, and it includes a maintenance log so you can keep track of your maintenance. As Trigg said, pumping your tank is generally recommended every 2 to 3 years. That's kind of the standard or the norm. The pumping frequency is outlined in your management plan if you have one. So the pumping frequency depends on how you use your system. If you don't have a management plan, this over here on the left side of the screen is a handout from the University of Minnesota. It's kind of similar to what you might see at a doctor's office, where it asks a question and then you rank it kind of 1 through 2, 1 through 3, and then you add up all of those at the bottom, and it'll tell you if you're low, medium, or high risk. So the normal is the low risk, and that's at every 2 to 3 years. Medium risk, they recommend 1.5 to 2.5 years, and if you're in that high risk category, you should be pumping annually. One nice thing about this sheet here is it lets you reevaluate your usage every few years. So if you just had a couple of kids leave the house, go out to work or go to college, might be time to revise that. You could go from perhaps a medium to a low. The alternative to that is if you're having children, you may go in the opposite direction from low to medium, depending on water usage. So do avoid excess water in your system. So non-waste related water should be kept out of the system. So divert rain roof drains, perimeter tiling, and sump pumps away from the system. It's also generally a good idea to conserve water. Try to fix your leaks quickly. Consider high efficiency appliances like a low flow toilet or a low water using washer. And only do full loads of laundry if you can. Oops. So our first don't is don't abuse your system. Shield your field, protect your system. All right, so a big one is don't drive over your system. Anything up to a riding lawnmower is okay. Other vehicles, trailers, and heavy machinery are not okay. And this is true even in the winter.
Especially winter, should I add? Funny story, should go without saying, but do not use your, if you have a mound, please do not use it as a launch pad for your snowmobile or for your motocross bikes. If you drive over frosted soils, driving over them can drive that frost further into the ground. So yeah, let's just avoid that.
Right, doesn't matter time of year, just stay off it. And that's true for parking too. Your system is not a parking lot. So please don't park on it. Also, don't build or place structures on your system. Remember that your system is not an open space that you can further develop. It's not the right location for sheds or play sets, especially sandboxes or gardens. One thing I like to think about is, think of your land where your system is located. It already serves a very important purpose, and that is the treatment of your wastewater. So these types of abuse can increase the potential for structural damage. So you can have a cracked tank. This may cause leakage of wastes from your tank. It may cause inflow of non-waste water and other materials into the tank. Crushed piping may cause backup of waste into your house. It also may prevent waste from reaching your tank and drain field. Compacted soils, they may cause seepage or surfacing of waste, and they may prevent waste from being absorbed and treated properly. So here's a photo kind of behind Trigg here. You can see these are the manhole covers. So the septic tank is over here. You can see these here, the clean outs and the inspection pipe. And so this system ran really close to the shed that the property owner decided they absolutely had to have. I mean, it was literally almost within inches of this shed. So generally the rule is 10 feet from a septic system before you can place any structures. So they ignored that. And then doubly troubling here, These are the only doors in and out of the shed. So if they wanted to get in here and get a lawnmower out or whatever type of stuff they're storing, they've got to go across the septic system. They don't have another route into the shed. This particular instance, we ended up posting a stop work order several times. It did go to the Board of Adjustment here at the county, which denied it based on our concerns over the septic system. And then I understand right now it's on a route to head towards court. And this is kind of a common situation in Sueur County, is we have all these old lake lots that are, you know, long and narrow. And so in this case, this landowner didn't have any place else to put the septic system. So it's extremely important to them, you know, and the community, that they protect this as long as possible. This is one of my favorite ones. So this gentleman purchased this piece of property surrounded by farm fields. They built this house, couple outbuildings, and then over here you can see in these circles, these are the lids to the tank. And then this is the drain field here, this kind of discolored grass area. And so they're doing two things wrong. First, if you see here, they are storing materials on top of the mound, which will compact that. And even more crazy, if you can see these kind of dirt tracks here, you know, this one here, and then there's one that goes all the way around the property. This landowner had teenage kids who were into motocross. So they thought it'd be a good idea to build a motocross course on the property. But the problem is they came too close to the mound here, and you can see it starting to erode. And then up here, they actually built the bank of the course into the mound, which is of course a bad idea. So that's, yeah, we don't want to see that. Here's an example of perhaps a good thing. This is a picture. The gentleman's septic system is kind of back in here. And to protect that system, they placed kind of rather large rocks or maybe even small boulders around the system, just to keep people from driving cars or trucks onto it. So another don't, this one, just think at the sink and don't overload the commode. I didn't come up with those witticisms. They come from the EPA. But don't treat your system like a garbage can. Don't flush anything but human waste and toilet paper. And here you can see a list of prohibited items. Some of these, you know, when I started getting septic systems, were a surprise to me. You know, I knew, like, I wouldn't put a cigarette butt down or a condom or a feminine hygiene product down the toilet, but facial tissues and paper towels were new to me. You know, it should be self-evident. You don't want to put chemicals or solvents down there, or diapers. One thing that is kind of controversial that we hear a lot about are these so-called flushable sanitary wipes. And nowadays they do actually sell packets of these that say septic safe. The general wisdom and recommendation is just avoid them if you can. If you can't avoid them, they need to go in the garbage. So minimize the use of harsh cleaning agents such as bleach or drain cleaners. Minimize the use of antibacterial products, commonly in soaps and hand sanitizers. In your dishwasher, if you can, try to use biodegradable gel detergents that have low or no phosphorus. In your clothes washing machine, use biodegradable liquid detergents and try to avoid using fabric softeners. What you want to do is look for cleaning products labeled septic safe, and these should be free of any dyes, fragrances, or other chemicals that could harm the good bacteria in your tank. These types of abuse increase the potential for biological or structural damage. They could plug your pipes, again, causing a backup of waste into your house. And they may prevent waste from reaching your drain field or tank. And more importantly, they could harm the good bacteria in the tank. This may reduce bacteria's ability to break down organic solids, like Trigg was explaining. And they may result in more frequent pumping, and they may result in plugging of pipes or the drain field itself. Establish and maintain appropriate vegetation. So a healthy vegetative cover will help to protect your system from erosion and structural damage. Don't plant long-rooted plants, shrubs, or trees near your system. So you'd want to see more of the stuff on the left here and try to avoid, you know, the vegetation on the right side here where they have deeper roots. They suggest using drought-tolerant plants with shallow root systems. And I understand now that certain suppliers do have native mixes available if you're interested. So roots can be very damaging. They can rip apart your drain field. They can plug your pipes, and they can even crack your tank. So here down on the left-hand side, you see a gentleman or a person trying to remove root buildup from an old pipe. And then this one on the right-hand side is fascinating to me because they're pulling all of that material out of their septic tank. It's partially roots and just other organic material. So mowing to prevent excessive plant and tree growth is recommended. So this is at a hog barn, and you can see this area of relatively thick vegetation. Their drain field is in there somewhere. So they recommend mowing this just because it's better. That way you can actually see if any seepage or any damage is going on to the surface of your drain field. Do practice caution around your septic system. Always ensure your tank lid is safely secured. This will prevent children and pets from falling into your tank. And never go into your septic tank. The tanks contain toxic gases and they lack oxygen, which can be fatal. It's sad, but every few years here you hear about somebody, either a child or an adult, who falls into one of these and then they end up perishing. So if you look at the lower right-hand side, this is kind of relatively new in the industry. This is meant to catch anything that falls in there before it actually goes into the tank. And I would say these have probably become more common in the future. So now we're going to talk about county and watershed involvement with upgrading septic systems. So we'll go into our septic inventories. So our methodology, first we have to figure out where we're going to do the inventory. So in our cases, we looked at lakes and lake shores. You create a buffer around the lake to determine the exact project area. That's determined by proximity to surface water and risk to water quality. We used a 300-foot buffer. And then all properties located within the project area must have a compliance inspection. The only properties are only for properties with no records or records that are out of date. So like if they had a compliance inspection from 10 years ago, that's out of date. And we do actually have a lot of properties that still have no records, so we don't know what's out there. That's always a huge red flag. Then we use grant funds to pay for the compliance inspection, various outreach and educational efforts, and for the final report. The German Jefferson septic inventory. This was our first take at trying to do one of these. This ranged for about 4 years, from 2011 to 2014. We had 344 parcels that were part of the inventory. We had 199 that were compliant, 140 non-compliant for that failure to protect groundwater, and 5 non-compliant imminent threat to public health. That worked out to be about a 42% non-compliance rate. The current compliance status for this inventory is that we have no open cases remaining. All of the violations have been resolved as part of this inventory. And then here, this is just a map showing you some of the areas that we targeted in that first inventory. So the second one we did is the Francis Ray, Sakata, and Tatanka septic inventory. This started in 2017 and is ongoing. For this one, we had 189 parcels that were part of the inventory. We had 111 compliant, 66 non-compliant, failure to protect groundwater, and 12 non-compliant, imminent threat to public health. So that worked out to be about a 41% non-compliance rate. With the inventories, we generally give about 5 years for compliance. So the original compliance deadline was 2023. And the current compliance status is we are down to 11 open cases remaining, and that works out to be about 6%. And then this is a map showing those lakes, and you can see in red, these were the properties that were targeted. Our most recent inventory was Gorman, Valmy, and Cordova. This one started in 2022 and is ongoing also. We have 70 parcels that were part of the inventory. 31 were compliant, 29 non-compliant for failing to protect groundwater, 10 non-compliant for imminent threat to public health. That worked out to about 56% non-compliance rate. This one has a deadline for 2027, so we still have a couple years left to try to reach that. And our current status is we have 22 cases remaining open, which works out to be about 31% of the properties. And then here, this is just a map showing those two lakes, and you can see the properties in yellow surrounding them.
And just to add that, that inventory was paid for through the Cannon River Watershed Joint Powers Organization through our watershed based implementation funding. So, and it was one of our activities, and our plan was to have 4 water systems that had a septic inventory. So we have 2 of the 4 completed, just to add a side note to that.
And yes, now we're going to close with some financial programs. So the main 2 types of programs are grants or loans. This first one here is what's called Ag BMP, Ag Best Management Practice. This is a low interest loan program. It's a state program funded by the federal government and administered through local soil water conservation district offices. This septic upgrade loan program, or we call it the SULP. This is a low interest loan program. It's funded and administered by the county. This is a first come, first served basis. In 2025, we're now requiring previous loan denial. So we're going to give that a try this year and see how that turns out for us. Then there's also the septic low income grant. To apply for this grant and be eligible, you must be low income per the USDA rural development standards. This is funded by state grants. Would note that your county would have to apply for the grant to the state. If you receive the grant, then it's administered by counties or SWCDs. There's also the MVCA income-based loan program. This is funded and administered by the Minnesota Valley Action Council. You also must be low income, and this is kind of interesting. I think it's through a number of different counties, but you have to be located in what they consider to be South Central Minnesota. And then, of course, there are, other loan and grant programs out there that we might be unfamiliar with. These are just the ones that are available in our county. What we would urge you and recommend you to do is to reach out to your local county and SWCD office to see what might be available for you if you're in that position where you need a new, or a replacement system or an upgrade to your existing system. So that's all we had. We want to make sure to save some time for questions. So we'll open it up for questions.
Stop sharing our screen too, so we can actually see folks.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you giving that presentation. And so far, it looks like we just got 1 question here for you. So how was the 3 feet decided as the cutoff distance between the septic tank and groundwater table or wet soils? It seems arbitrary that it's not soil dependent. So like say a very sandy soil, why does that rule come in?
Well, I mean, because, even like sandy soils, different soils will exhibit those indications of like a high water table differently. So in sandy soils, we're less likely to see those indicators, or we're more likely to see them further and further deeper within the ground, which indicates that they will be able to support an in-ground system better. How exactly that was determined, I am not completely sure. I just know that the rule has been in place for a while. Rules and regulations have been in place for a while, and mass enforcement of the regulations really didn't occur until 1996, but the rules and regulations have been they're in place for a while.
Yeah, so the MPCA does rely on the University of Minnesota to do a lot of the science to back the rules that regulate wastewater treatment. So at my level, at least, I can't get into the nitty-gritty science of it. But we're being told by the MPCA and the U of M that is the minimum required distance. And who knows, in the future that might change, but for now, that's the existing regulation.
Perfect. All right, we're starting to get a few more coming in here. Are holding tanks still a viable option for low use cabins?
Yes, holding tanks are always options, especially if there's not room for a soil treatment area. Thing is that holding tanks really don't provide you any treatment. So while they may be a considerably cheaper option up front. The cost doesn't really show until years and years and years on, where you're having to essentially pump the tanks empty every time it gets full. Depending on how much water you use, that could be very quickly or very spread out. Like if you're in like a seasonal cabin, you're there Memorial Day weekend and 4th of July and Labor Day only like a few times out of the year, then yes, that might be a perfect option. But if you're in a larger full-time dwelling, I would say that it'd be much wiser to steer away from that as an option.
Right, you're gonna find out you don't like having a holding tank for your house very soon, because you're gonna be pumping it all the time. But for a cabin, it may be a better choice. We also have that for a lot of accessory structures. You know, somebody wants to put a bathroom in a pole barn, or pole shed or whatever. Holding tank is probably a good way to go, because you're not gonna have the amount of flow that would necessitate of an entire system. Oh, what else? There's something else I forget now.
In some cases though, right, like a holding tank might be your only option.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep, so like I was talking about those lake lots, a lot of those folks don't have an option because they can't fit a system on there. And so you know, when you're considering lake property, just consider your usage, consider what size tank you have. Maybe talk to a maintainer to try to get into an idea of, you know, how much it would be to pump it. And then try and figure out how many times you would need it pumped. Because in the long run, you know, you may be better off with a full system if you can fit it in, because it's going to be cheaper in the long run. Otherwise, you're paying, you know, every few weeks, every couple months or something to get it pumped. And then there's the problem of, like Trigg said, it's not treating your waste. So you've got to the pumper has to take that waste somewhere. And it's getting a little harder to find cities that are going to accept your septic. We just had here in Montgomery that we just got notice last year that they are now no longer accepting
residential waste from
Yep.
outside the city limits.
And that was a big one for us. So now we had a bunch of calls from different maintainers and providers who are scrambling to try to figure out, well, where are we going to take this waste? You can land apply it, but you have to be careful. There's only so much you could put on because you don't want to overload it with you know what, the chemicals and stuff that's gonna be in your septic. So that is something that I think the U is working on, trying to figure out, you know, what are these people going to do? Because that's becoming more and more common that the cities aren't gonna take it. And it's always better if you can treat it on site if possible. So we're trying to talk mostly about those cases where that's not possible.
All right, I got some more questions, and I got a couple comments kind of just adding to what you guys said. So somebody did mention that the use of holding tanks is going to vary by county, so you definitely need to check with your county on what the local ordinances are. And then another one here, kind of diving a little deeper into the 3 feet rule, and they mentioned that 3 feet's required for sandy soils, so then you need less soil for the finer textured soils. But they were saying that finer textured soils need 3 feet to make sure the effluent doesn't build up or get saturated to the surface. So that was some more information, I guess, along the lines of that 3 feet rule there. So, all right. Somebody was wondering, do you guys have the website links and phone numbers for those funding sources, the financial assistance? Do you guys have?
We have a list, but again, it's gonna vary by county, so you're gonna have to be really careful. Just reach out to your local county offices or soil and water conservation districts. I don't want to give you information only because I don't know what county you're in, and I don't want you to get your hopes up and then you don't have that funding source. So just contact your local environmental services department or soil and water conservation district, just because it might vary and it might be different.
Perfect. Thanks, Holly. And then somebody was wondering, how does one discern how full their tank is?
So a septic tanks usually consist of like size from like 1,000 gallons to maybe on like the lower end, so to like 2,000 gallons on the higher end. So depending on your usage, the septic tank is gonna fill up relatively quickly. So septic tank will always be full. how you determine if you need maintenance on it, it's consists of measuring the sludge and scum layers, the layers of solids that build up on the bottom and the top of the tank. And that really can only be done by a maintainer. So I'd really recommend it going off of that 2 to 3 year timeline.
Yep. And then some of them have alarms too. I'll let you know.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. And then looks like I got one more here. So if a tank fails, is it possible to remove the tank and replace it with a new one in the same location?
Yes, it is. You might need to have your soil treatment area, your drain field inspected to support the idea that the drain field itself is at least compliant, and then you would be able to, replace that tank.
I think part of that depends on how old the tank is and if you can get it out in one piece. Sometimes just abandoning the tank is a better method, and that's just, they would crush it. You know, you'd hire a contractor, they would crush it, and then they backfill it with gravel and put some dirt on top of it. But again, that's probably gonna depend on what room you have, the age of the tank, and the status of the tank. If it crumbles as you're trying to get it out, you're not gonna be able to put a new tank in that location, so.
Perfect. All right. Well, again, I appreciate your guys' time. Oh, here's another one that popped in. So, is it usually not the best idea to try and remove a used tank, as it is also expensive to dispose of the used tank?
So, I don't know what it costs to try to remove a tank. That would be a question for like an
For your installer.
or a septic contractor. What we see is most of the time they end up abandoning them.
So crushing them, filling them in place,
Right.
rather as opposed to.
I would assume that would be the first choice, just because it seems to me that it would be the easier route, path of least resistance. But again, it probably depends on if you have room, to abandon it and relocate it, or if you actually need to put it in the same spot again, then you're probably going to be in a harder, more expensive situation.
Perfect. Well, if anybody else has any questions, throw them in the chat here, or throw them in the Q&A here quick. But as of right now, I'm not seeing anything else. Did any of you guys have anything else that you wanted to add on or elaborate on from your presentation, or you think you covered everything pretty well?
Well, I think we covered everything that we wanted to. I would just say, try to think long-term, because if you abuse your system, you're gonna end up putting in a new septic system eventually. And that is not a cheap prospect. And it's, at least in my opinion, it's not gonna get any cheaper either.
No.
So if you're making that investment to your property and you wanna get the most out of your money and your time and everything, take care of your system. Preventative care and proper maintenance. It's big, it's just like your car, keep up with your maintenance and don't, abuse it. And it'll last you for the, lifespan that you expect. And
Perfect.
most now are lasting 20 to 30 years.
40.
Yep,
Yeah.
we've been hearing even 40 years now. I don't know if we've had any that have been that long yet, but that's what the industry is expecting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's if you put one in for 20 to 30 grand, 40 years is a good chunk of time if you can get that out of your investment.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, again, I really appreciate your guys' time and all the information that you shared with everybody. And I want to let everybody else know too that the recordings will go out with a follow-up email and some information and stuff too afterwards. So, all right. Well, if that's it, then we'll see you guys later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.